You've spelunked into the Matt Cave. Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Matt Cave. Thank you all so much for spelunking on by. This week, reaction to a dud of a Super Bowl. Absolute snoozer. And then I will be talking about the Utah Jazz trades, what they collected. It was mainly second-round picks. And what I think they're going to be doing with them this coming offseason. And then the Utah Hockey Club. It's infuriating watching them. It really is. But anyway, that's the plan. We'll see how I stick to it. And I appreciate you all being here. If you could do me a favor, like, comment, rate, subscribe, whatever it is, however you listen, helps me out a ton. Thank you all so much for all you've done already and for what you continue to do for me. It's awesome. I've been doing this now for 5 years. I have been doing this show. 5 whole years. I started in 2020, and I'm still here, and I'm not going anywhere. The goal is for me to get either this show to go daily or for me to get on something. I don't know. But that's the goal. That is the goal. So I appreciate you all being here. And now let's kind of dive into things. So this Super Bowl, what a dud, right? I mean, I get it. Everyone's sick of Eagles. Everyone's sick of the Chiefs. Well, these are the two best teams in the league. Like, they are. There's no two ways around it. And it pains me to say that about the Eagles because I cannot stand head coach Nick Sirianni, and I cannot stand quarterback Jalen Hurts. I don't like them, either of them. They're smug, arrogant, and it's just that they give off the wrong vibe, and they're the antithesis of what I think those positions on a football team should be. Did it work for them? Yeah, this season it did. But it took an all-world running back for them to get here. If it weren't for Saquon Barkley, they would not have even made the playoffs, in my opinion. I still stick to what I said about Jalen Hurts. Yeah, he made a great throw in the Super Bowl. He really did. That dagger he threw down the field to Devontae Smith for 40-some-odd yards, fantastic throw. But those are so few and far between that if he did not have Saquon Barkley behind him, he would have been forced to throw the ball, and it would not have done well. So, Eagles win this one. It is a surprise to me, but not necessarily to everyone. So, that's really on me, I guess. I was expecting another Chiefs, air quotes, upset over the Eagles this time, but it just didn't happen. So, back to the drawing board with the Chiefs. I don't know what's going to happen with Travis Kelce over the offseason, but he is not the force he used to be. And I think that really has an effect on things. Because he doesn't suck up all of the air like he used to, it just doesn't... The offense isn't the same. And the Chiefs need to figure something out. Whether that's a different offensive strategy or the offensive line really needs reinforcements. Kingsley Suamataia is a rookie, so everyone that's like blaming him, oh, they shouldn't have taken him. He was a second-round pick, and he was a rookie. So everyone that expects a rookie to come in right away and be explosive, there's like 300 picks in the NFL draft. I would say 13 to 15 of those picks ever pan out to do really well in their first year. So that the percentage, I'm not a math genius, but the percentage on that is really, really low. So it's not the end that the Chiefs wanted. It's not the end that I wanted for the NFL and football seasons. Ohio State winning the national championship and the Eagles winning the Super Bowl. I mean, those are two check marks on the Armageddon card, I guess. But here we are. So there you have it. That's the Super Bowl. I got it wrong. First time I got it wrong in like 5 years. Oh, man, I just wish that the offensive line was sentient for the Chiefs, because if they were, then the game would have been much different, but they weren't sentient. There was no offensive line in this game. So we move along to draft season. So we're going to be moving on to my favorite time of the year, which is the offseason, which is roster moves. It is the NFL draft. It's all of the fun stuff, at least for me. Yeah, the stuff on the field is great, but I really, really, really enjoy the offseason and what all these different teams do and seeing what goes on there. It'll be interesting to see what goes on with the New York Jets and that quarterback situation because Aaron Rodgers will not be returning. At least that's what Adam Schefter said. And what does that mean for the Jets? That owner is the worst owner in the NFL, which which is nice to say. And Robert Saleh is back with the 49ers as their defensive coordinator. So Fred Warner gets the guy back who made him a star. So, yeah, that's where we're at. I mean, the offseason is Matt's season. I love it. I love all of it. The trades, the intrigue. Myles Garrett requested a trade from the Browns, which I think is more than fair. He's given everything to that franchise, and they've had one postseason appearance. And then after that, they got rid of the quarterback that got them there. They got rid of Baker Mayfield. So that's kind of where the Browns are at, too. So it'll be very interesting to see what the different bad teams do to try to turn their fortunes around next season. But I'm very excited about that. All right, so let's move it along to the Utah Jazz and what they did. They were the facilitator. I said this last week, and I recorded my show before a lot of the reporting came out on the Luka Doncic trade with Anthony Davis, all that stuff, Lakers, Mavs. I'm sure you've heard that to death, so I'm not going to really go into it too much. But I did not know that the Jazz didn't know the actual nuts and bolts of the trade until about like an hour before it was announced. So I'm still going to stick by what I said about Danny Ainge being the godfather and just saying to everybody, remember who made this possible? You know, next time I call, pick up the phone sort of thing. I think that's what he did. And a lot of the Jazz fans I've seen like online in different places are upset that they didn't trade John Collins or Colin Sexton or any of those guys. They couldn't trade Colin Sexton because he was injured, so he would have failed any physical. And John Collins still has another year after this year on his contract. He has a player option that everybody is going to assume he's going to pick up. And so having him more tradable either in the offseason or at the trade deadline next season, he's going to be a much more attractive piece for teams to have. So obviously the eyes are on the offseason. The eyes are on the rest of this season for the Jazz to lose every single game. But there's one game I really want them to win. There is one game I want them to win. And it's Monday night against the Lakers because it's the first game that Luka is going to be playing alongside LeBron. And if the Jazz can just pull off the miracle, nothing would make me happier. I would love it. It would be so funny because I think they circled that game on their calendar because the Jazz suck, right? They're terrible. And so they figure, oh, well, we'll get a win for the first game of the future of our franchise because LeBron James isn't getting any younger. We've been saying that for about 7 years now. And Luka is still in his 20s. And I talked about the trade, about what the Mavericks were saying about Luka. Obviously, there's more to come out as we get further removed from the trade and the lips will become more loose about what the reasons are. It's just really fascinating. And I really like it because it's taking the power away from agents. Like, I don't mind players having the power. What I mind is the agents having the power. And the agents speaking on behalf of their players saying, no, he's not going to go there. Last I checked, there's 30 opportunities for you and your client. You don't really get to say no. You know, that's how I look at it. And that's how I feel about a lot of these agents. Their job is to get their players the most money, but you could have a situation where the agents all say, no, we don't want to go anywhere. And then the guy hits the free agent market and the teams remember that. And so he doesn't have a team to go to. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I hope the GMs do more of this sort of thing. It makes it so much more fun. And I know that Adam Silver loved it because the attention in the lead up to the Super Bowl was on the NBA. It was not on the NFL. Now, that is a little bit to do with it, the Chiefs and the Eagles again, but the attention was on the NBA. Everywhere you looked, it was whether you were looking at Yahoo Sports, CBS Sports, ESPN, The Athletic, all the stuff was about the NBA and the trade deadline. All of it. And we all thought that the trade deadline was going to be centered around Jimmy Butler, which did eventually happen. And it happened because the Jazz helped facilitate it. So what the Jazz did is they took on a lot of salaries. And they took on the salaries of Mo Bamba, Jalen Hood-Schifino, Josh Richardson, and Kenyon Martin Jr. Kenyon Martin Jr. is still on his rookie deal, I believe, and so he's not that much money, and he was a first-round pick. So there is the opportunity to develop him into a usable piece as the Jazz move forward. Whatever that piece is, I don't know, but if there is a coach that can figure it out, it's Will Hardy. And the other ones they waived. So Josh Richardson, Jalen Hood-Schifino, Mo Bamba, they waived. And then they had P.J. Tucker and Dennis Schroeder, who was in Utah for about as long as Russell Westbrook has been in Utah, the 2 times that the Jazz have acquired him. And it was funny when I got the news, I was talking with my mom, I was like, oh, the Jazz just were a part of another major trade, or they're part of the Jimmy Butler trade. And my mom's like, who'd they get? And I said, they got Dennis Schroeder. She said, who? I said, don't worry, he won't be a Jazz man for long. Next day, he's gone. So there you go. What they got was a bunch of goodwill among front offices around the league and a lot of second-round picks and a potential solid bench contributor in Kenyon Martin Jr. Will that happen? We'll see. I don't have high hopes for it, but it is something. And if we go into the Jazz and, where they stand in the standings, they currently have the 3rd worst record in the NBA. They have the same amount of wins as the Pelicans, but the Pelicans have one more loss. And then the Washington Wizards are a dumpster fire. They have been pretty much the entire time I've been alive. That franchise has not been any good. They've had some good players like John Wall. Bradley Beal was really good. Gilbert Arenas was good until he thought he could take a gun into a locker room. Yeah. So that's really what's happening there. The Jazz really only have 4 teams to worry about, and that is the Pelicans, the Wizards, the Hornets, and the Raptors. Nobody knows what the Raptors are doing. They got Brandon Ingram in a trade from the Pelicans, and it's like, you have 7 guys who play the same position. What are you doing? What are you doing? Who's going to play? Who's going to get the minutes? So Brandon Ingram is definitely going to hit the free agent market. And the rest of the time is going to be for the Jazz, at least, figuring out these young guys, and especially Kenyon Martin Jr. I think he's going to get a lot of run with the Jazz. I don't think he's going to start any games, and if he does, that means injuries have hit. But he will get a lot of time on the court, and I think that's very important because all the fans like to focus on the big pieces, right? Oh, we need Cooper Flagg. We needed Scoot Henderson or, Zion Williamson or something like that. And yeah, that is very important. But if you look at like the Denver Nuggets, for example, they never had that big high draft pick. Jamal Murray was a first rounder, sure, but he wasn't high lottery. And then everybody knows the story of Nikola Jokic. I don't need to tell you about the Taco Bell draft pick. But that they have a deep roster, and that's what allowed them to win the title. And that's what has allowed them to kind of stay under the radar as much as a team that is 3rd in the Western Conference right now. So you can build a fantastic team through the draft. It's just not going to be the biggest stuff hitting the news. And that's never going to be the Jazz. For as much money as Ryan Smith is willing to pump into everything, the Jazz are still not a market that's attractive to basketball players. So that's really what we're looking for the rest of the year for the Jazz. They would need to lose out except for that game against LA. I really want them to win. And then watch the other bottom feeders and how they perform, because the Hornets are probably going to go full tank mode. The Wizards are, even if the Wizards put out their best team every night, they're not going to beat anybody. The Pelicans, they still have talent, but we'll see. They're probably going to shut down Zion Williamson. They're probably going to put him on the injury report for, a hangnail. He's got the sniffles, so he can't play. Something like that. And then we have the Jazz. Those are really the bad teams, because in the West, you go 1 through 13, all of those teams still have a realistic shot of making the postseason. In the East, It's 1 through 10. Maybe 1 through 11 if you're lucky. So that's really what we're looking for the Jazz. We're looking for them to lose everything except for the games against the Lakers and hope that the other teams win. So the Jazz need to lose to the other tankers is what needs to happen. And then I just want to touch on the gaffe that Keontae George had against the Suns. It was a funny one. There's nothing malicious about it. It's just funny. The young guy was clapping about his teammates about getting back in transition defense, and the play that happened was his man that sank the three in transition defense. That was his responsibility. So just a funny thing, a little learning lesson there for the young guy. You got to do your job and you got to do it well. So that's kind of where that's at. And that's really the future for the Jazz, is they need to win by losing, because Cooper Flagg is the real deal. He's the realest of deals. And the Jazz, if they keep the margins of losses relatively small, they'll have an increased odd of getting the top overall pick among the three teams, because the worst three teams have equal odds, and the team that has what am I trying to say here? The smallest margin of defeat, I guess, average margin of defeat, gets the best odds of those three teams. So that's where we're at for the Jazz. Now, I didn't put this on the docket here, but I want to talk about BYU basketball for a second. They're not very good. I'm going to say that. They're not very good. They're inconsistent. Their main scorer is hot and cold, and it's like watching... I don't know what it's like watching. Watching BYU basketball when they can't hit a shot is horrible, because they don't really have the athleticism to get to the hoop, get and one plays and stuff like that. They have to hit threes. And that's just the way that everything was left for Coach Kevin Young from Mark Pope. That was the system. That's how Mark Pope had to recruit and had to have his team. They had to make threes because he will now, he won't. Mark Pope won't, but Kevin Young will. He didn't really have the cachet to bring in the athletic kids. Obviously, that's changed with Kevin Young and with NIL and this huge booster backing that BYU has now. And so things might change, but right now, they need to hit shots. And the last two games, they just haven't. And I know that's kind of funny to hear about basketball, because you're probably thinking, yeah, duh, Matt, it's basketball. They have to hit their shots. It's a little bit different if you don't have athleticism, because if you're cold from the 3-point line, if you have athleticism, you can still get to the hoop and get some cheap, easy points. But for BYU, they don't have that. They have to hit their outside game, and they just haven't recently. So that's where they've lost the last two games. They had a really big opportunity against Arizona. It was at home. ESPN was there. It could have been a really good resume-building win, but instead they lost by 11. And then they went to Cincinnati and lost by 18. So that's kind of where we're at with BYU. And for as rough of a season as Utah has had, they're 5-7 in the Big 12. So they're not technically out of it. Their overall record is a little icky. Anytime you have double-digit losses this early into the season is a little icky. But there is still some hope that they can get to postseason basketball, because they're actually in a conference that plays basketball now instead of the Pac-12 where it was just Arizona running over everybody. So it's different. It's different. All right, so let's move on to the hockey club. And they've won 3 of the past 4 games. It's true. I know. You know why they have, though? The majority of those games were on the road. That's why they've won 3 of their last 4. Yeah. Dylan Guenther being back is such a huge shot in the arm to everything that the hockey club needs right now. He's an actual threat every time his line is on the ice and they're in the offensive zone. He's a real threat that teams have to account for, so they can't just focus, and they can't really just stay in their box and one, is what I like to call it, because I come from basketball. That's what I call the defense, is a box and one. So with Dylan Guenther out there, he had back-to-back game-winning goals in overtime, and he actually almost had another one against the Capitals on Sunday where he could have. It was clock was running down 2-1. He was on the break. He just couldn't get a shot off in time for the magic to happen again. But Dylan Guenther is the real deal, and I'm so happy that the Utah Hockey Club has him locked up for such a long time because he is still such a young guy. He's like 21 years old, and he's doing this. He's leading the team in goals. Like, him and Clayton Keller are tied at 20, and Clayton Keller isn't necessarily known for his goal-scoring prowess. He can do it, but he's more of a captain, right? He does the dirty stuff. He'll pass the puck off if the opportunity arises instead of taking a selfish shot. So that's kind of what we've got going there. So looking ahead, the Utah Hockey Club has a couple of weeks off due to the Four Nations tournament. If you're unaware, the Four Nations tournament was concocted as something that has been in the works for a while, don't get me wrong, but really it was a way to freeze Russia out. So it's the US, it's Canada, it's Sweden, and it's Finland. So those are the four nations playing in this mini tournament, trying to goose up the ratings because the ratings for the NHL this season have not been great. But it's a good way to get international hockey back on the main stage. The NHL is allowing players to play in the upcoming Olympics, and so they kind of want to have some sort of international tournament in between, a la the UEFA Euro tournament or the CONCACAF Nations League, stuff like that, just so that interest can be drummed up and that you can see best on best. That's really what the Four Nations tournament is. It's a jab at Russia, but it's also, hey, these are the best players on the planet playing against each other in a tournament. Why not? It's really cool. So that's why you won't be seeing any Utah Hockey Club games until February 22nd, which is 2 weeks from the 13 days from the Utah Hockey Club beating Alexander Ovechkin and the Capitals. And what was even sweeter in this win for Utah is that it was the first ever shootout victory for Utah Hockey Club. That's pretty neat. And to make it even better, Vejmelka had to come in for an injured Connor Ingram who got a concussion from an Alexander Ovechkin slap shot straight to the face. So Vejmelka had to come in cold. Sure, he gave up 4 goals. A couple of them were stinkers, but I've come to expect that from Vejmelka. But he stonewalled them in the shootout. He didn't give up a single goal in the shootout. So it was a fun game. When Utah Hockey Club was up 4-2 early in the third period, I was thinking, uh-oh. The Capitals have them right where they want them. They were going to give up those 2 goals, and it was going to go to overtime, or Utah was just going to lose in regulation in a heartbreaking fashion. That just seems to be modus operandi for this team this year. That would have happened if they were at the Delta Center. Let's just face facts here. That would have happened if they were at the Delta Center, but they weren't. They were at Capital One Arena on the East Coast in Washington, D.C., and they got the dub. They won, and they won against a team that is doing incredibly well. If we want to look at the Washington Capitals right now, they are first in the Eastern Conference, first in the Metropolitan Division, and they are doing quite well for themselves. I got to say, they're 10 points clear of second place in their division, and they're 9 points clear of second place in the Eastern Conference. So this is a team that is incredibly good. So that's how that's shaping out over on the Eastern Conference. In the Western Conference, the Utah Hockey Club is, well, pretty much out of it in the Central Division. Pretty much out of it. You never want to say never, but I'm gonna say never on this one. But they're only 6 points out of a wild card spot, and there's rumors that they'll be buyers at the trade deadline in March. But really, look out in the offseason. So you know how a couple weeks ago I had a pie in the sky dream about the Utah Hockey Club sneaking a deal for Mikko Rantanen from the Colorado Avalanche. Well, that didn't happen. But what can happen is Mikko Rantanen hits the free agent market, and guess what club has the most money to spend? Oh, yeah, that's us. That's the Utah Hockey Club. So the sweepstakes aren't over yet. They're just on a pause. If they can't get him, there's still a couple of guys they can get in free agency. I'll go over that when the time comes. But if a team like the Nashville Predators want to give up, well, there's a team over here that really has their eyes set on some people. Same thing with the Ducks or the Blues even. So the Blues and the Ducks are only 3 points back of the Utah Hockey Club. So they probably won't be selling, but there are teams in the Eastern Conference that possibly could be, like the Penguins could be selling, the Sabres, the Canadiens, Islanders, Rangers. There's so many teams on the East Coast that could be sellers as we get closer to the trade deadline that, Utah Hockey Club's got some draft picks and some salary cap room. Why not? Why not swing for the fences and try to get into the playoffs? Wet the metal of the young guys here in this club. Get playoff hockey to Utah probably a year earlier than what everybody was expecting. Why not? All right, so that does it for all of that. One more thing I want to bring up, and that is, Sid Meier's Civilization 7. Civilization is one of my, I wouldn't say it's one of my all-time favorites, but the last couple that they've made, Civ 6 and Civ 5, have been fantastic games. They have been. And this game is a steaming hot pile of garbage. It really is. It's not good. I refunded it. That is how bad it is. So that's very disappointing to me. I was looking forward to this game. I was very excited for it. I got the Uber Ultra Edition that, got me early access. Technically, it doesn't come out until this coming Thursday. It's not fun. It's not a fun game. So when you start up a game, you can choose a leader. Leader could be Charlemagne. It could be Benjamin Franklin. It could be Napoleon. But you're not playing as the nation they come from to start off. You have a pre-curated list that isn't all that whelming. In fact, it's quite underwhelming. Early civilizations like the Mississippians or the Romans, the Greeks, stuff like that. And it's just like, that's not... What? One thing I do like is you can level up these leaders to get unique advantages for your civilization the more you play the game, which I think is good. It allows you to play the game. You get a little bit more for your time than you did with Civilization 6, for instance, because in Civilization 6, you didn't level up those civilizations that you played as. It was just kind of one game, and then you can choose another game and play as a different civilization with no uniqueness to it other than what is already given to that group. The other thing that is a real problem is the customization for both either multiplayer or single player. In Civilization 5 and 6, you could choose the victory conditions. You could choose the length of the game. You could choose if there was a time limit. You could choose how fast you wanted the game to go. A lot of that is removed in Civilization 7, and they don't really give a good reason why. And so, that's a problem. And then another problem is how you build out your cities, is you expand them out from the core area, which is true of all Civilization games. Well, not all of them, starting with Beyond Earth, going to 6 and then 7. But it's different because the strain on your GPU and on your CPU, by the time late game comes around, you cannot run this game unless you have a top-of-the-line computer. That's not okay. That precludes so many people. And so overall, this is like the first time in a long time I have played a game and I come to you spelunkers and say, do not buy this game. I refunded it. Do not buy this game. It's not good. I will say that I will give this game another chance in about 6 months to 8 months' time, just to see if they've made any improvements that are actually worth my time and attention. Because right now, it's a hot steaming pile of garbage. It is not good. So do not get this game. All right, everybody, that is the episode this week. Thank you all so much for being here. I will be back next week to talk about the Jazz and the men's basketball teams. Other than that, the Utah Hockey Club, maybe they'll make a trade. Who knows? But football is over. Sad, I know. And this game was terrible. The most boring Super Bowl I have watched since the Patriots-Rams when they scored a touchdown in the fourth quarter, and that was the only touchdown. Like, this game was bad. Anyway, thanks for being here. I'll see you all next week. Bye.